Okay, let's get started. So welcome, Fred Kofman. Welcome, Fred, to the Conscious Consulting podcast and video. I'm super happy to have you here, of course. And yeah, welcome from Spain to Mexico.
Yes, what a pleasure to see you across space.
Across the space, but the Spanish-speaking area. So Fred, I think it's really been like, I was thinking about 7, 8, 9 years ago that we met the first time when you helped the consulting company where I was partner then to grow and expand and to transform. So we have been in contact ever since that, and like we met in San Francisco, we met again in Vienna, so we met in different spaces, and it's so exciting also to see how you are always more and more growing and developing. And there is one thing that I would like to start with the question, which is that you wrote Conscious Business. I think it's really almost about 20 years ago. And for me, you are maybe, please correct me, the first one who like brought together the topic of consciousness and conscious into the business context. I haven't seen a lot of that before. And so 20 years ago, you wrote the book, and I'd like to ask you, how do you see that the level of consciousness and conscious business has evolved since that? What has changed in business in this last 20 years since you wrote the book to now? How do you see how leadership has developed in that time?
Well, not very much, I have to say. I'm sad. No, it's a delicate question because, of course, things have changed and people have an awareness of the topics that relate to human interaction and way that people work together for the good of all or in detriment of some significant parts of our community. So I have to say that there is a deeper level of awareness in terms of what's important. I don't believe that there's any deeper level of mastery or understanding of how to behave in terms of achieving a higher level of performance, connection, peace of mind. I don't see that. I wish I did, but it's like looking at first grade and saying, how has the knowledge of the children evolved? And I said, well, first grade is always first grade. The kids come and every person has to learn from scratch. They don't really inherit a culture where the particular skills that are required to live a good life are learned. And if anything, I find today's culture worse than the culture I grew up in. So if you ask me, would you like to grow up in the 60s, which is what I did, my early childhood years, or would you like to be a child now, even before the pandemic? I'd say, I wouldn't want to be a child now. I mean, I'm sure the children now are happy too, but given my experience, and perhaps I'm biased, I don't see that today's environment is more conducive to human flourishing than it was when I grew up. And it was far from good even, let alone perfect. But today, I shudder at what I see in terms of the general state of consciousness of the world, business, and so on. So people do arrive into the business world with the same hindrances, the same, from a Buddhist standpoint, I would say impurities of mind, tendencies that make their lives and the lives of those around them pretty miserable. So there's a lot of work to do. I think that's the good news. and the opportunity for improvement is magnificent. That's how I console myself. But it's not worse. I wouldn't say things are terrible, but I wouldn't say in the 30 years that I've been working in the business world, things have changed very much. And one of the things that hasn't changed is that every, I would say, micro generation, every 5 years, the fresh batch of managers like, oh, we're going to change the world, and this is different, and now we're entrepreneurs, and now we're in the age of Aquarius, and now we're in the special time, and we are the ones, and things are changing. But I'm old enough to remember when the people in the 60s were saying that, and then the hippies turned into the yuppies, and those who were smoking dope and opposing the war in Vietnam became the executives of the corporations that were the same as everybody. So it's more a circular process rather than an evolutionary process that I see. I do believe there's evolution in terms of the leading edge. There are scientists, there are consultants, there are people who are studying, there's some very enlightened business people, but those characters have occurred throughout history. So you have to say, how do you evaluate a historical period? We talk about the Renaissance. The Renaissance were 150 people. There were a lot of more people in the world, but when you look at the artists, the scientists, Leonardo da Vinci, okay, that's one. Who else? Michelangelo, okay, that's two. I mean, you keep going, and maybe you remember 10, maybe 20, and a historian may get 100. The rest of the world was in darkness. So today, yes, you could say, if we look at the scholars, the people, some extraordinary CEOs and consultants, there are some very enlightened people, which I don't know they existed before. I think there is a progress in philosophy, in science, in spirituality and our understanding. There's great wisdom, pundits, and gurus, scholars and teachers that show up. But as I said, it's an eternal work where those who get a glimpse of the truth have to adjust their teaching to the times. Like in Buddhism, the Dharma is always the same. It's always the same. Nothing much has changed. I believe the truth is the truth, and it doesn't change. But the way to communicate that truth changes with the times. So whereas, the original Sanskrit analogies are to the ocean and the drop, or to a mirror, the consciousness reflections. Now we can talk about your virtual reality headsets, or we can talk about a game simulation, or we can talk about the Matrix. The notion is exactly the same. We just have other analogies that are more appropriate. Maybe 50 years ago, people used the movies or the TV. Now we would use, as I said, augmented reality or virtual reality, or in the future, we may use haptic suits or other devices or AI. But the content, the lesson, it's always going to be the same, if it's true.
Fred, I think that's quite worrisome what you're saying. I would maybe describe it not as pessimistic as you are, but really what has changed, I think, since the 60s are the circumstances in which we're living. And I can remember also when I was in Silicon Valley, we said the problem that we have right now, the difference is that the tools that we are having, the technology is extremely powerful. So we have quite impressive tools at our hands. And the worrisome thing is if we use them from the same level of consciousness, like 20, 30, 40 years ago, it could be that we end up with being fools with really powerful tools. So today, one person can maybe do so much more harm than maybe 20 or 30 years ago. So I think the problem that we have now is that it's even more dramatic. So if we don't really expand or develop our consciousness and use wisdom, on the tools, on these powerful tools and technology that we have in hand, we could be extremely, and we are actually extremely destructive. I mean, we've become really experts in being very effective in destroying and exploiting our natural resources to the extent that we are almost go to a level of extinction, and the world that is somehow degrading environmentally. And we have the tools to destroy them, but we don't have the wisdom to not do it. I think this is something that really worries me. I don't know what you think.
I couldn't agree more with you. But I mean, I have to say at the same time, what you said, you could have said in the 60s, which is what the Club of Rome said in the 60s. Exactly that. We're so much more powerful today than 20 years ago. And before was when nuclear power appeared and the nuclear bombs. And before was when, in World War II, the machines that killed so many people. So, I mean, you go every 20 years and we're exponentially more capable of destroying everything. So that is true. I'm not disagreeing, but if you look at the pattern, the trend is going the wrong way, so to speak, because we're ever more powerful and we're not ever more wise. But that has been true 20 and 40 and 60 years ago as well. So far we haven't destroyed each other or humanity or the environment, but we're getting closer. I mean, this trend cannot continue.
I mean, that's a good thing. I fully agree. When I was growing up in the 70s, I was so afraid of the Cold War and the atomic bombing. But still, we were like half the people. Like in the 70s, when I was born, we were like 4 billion people. Now we're I think 8 billion people. So there is this exponential curve that we are in. And as you say, it is heating up, kind of. And some people say we are the last generation that really can stop this development or turn it around. But the question is if we are up to it from the level of our consciousness. And I saw, I think also in one of your writings or on your website, you always also use that, what I think is really to be true is that we cannot solve our problems from the same level of consciousness that created it. I mean, this is what Albert Einstein famously said, and it's also, I would say, the main point of Conscious Consulting Group is to say, okay, if we want to solve our problems, and I fully relate to you, there are so many young generations, they want to change the world, but sometimes this is also problematic because with the old level of consciousness trying to change and solve problems and save the world, they are creating a lot of chaos and maybe sometimes more harm because they're not really aware of what they're doing. I mean, the intention is good, but the impact sometimes is also quite destructive because so many people are just running around and doing all kinds of things and using a lot of resources. So this idea and I guess, or I would say that this is maybe also your intention in your work, is to help maybe develop and deepen our consciousness and our awareness in leaders who have powerful positions. So this is my assumption, but as you so often ask people, what is your job? And that's a question that you ask very often. I'd like to ask you, Fred, what is your job?
My job is to remind people of their true nature and help them express it consciously in business and beyond. That's my job. That's how I define my life mission. That's my job. And whatever I do, I measure against that. That's not exactly what I sell. That's not what I propose when I do consulting, although I'm not hiding it. But it's the expression of realization about who you are, which is, in my view, the same as what the world is and what other people are. And with that depth of awareness, then come out, so to speak, but express it and manifest it through the different activities of your life. Which it's like being consciously, living consciously, working consciously. but I don't really endorse completely. I understand the model, and I think it's a reasonable model about the levels of consciousness. There are many ways in which people grow in higher and higher levels or deeper levels of self-awareness. But my spiritual or my metaphysical attitude is more the direct path. Like you either see it or you don't. And when you see it, there's no level. Like you're awake. There's no level of awakeness. You're awake now, or you can. Yeah, the moment you either read or you don't read. But if you don't know how to read, you don't know. And when you learn how to read, you don't get like I'm more proficient in reading. That probably means you can read more complex things. But once you understand the words and how to put them together and how they make a sense, that's it. Now then you have a lot to read. I mean, you can read many different things, from trashy stories and novels all the way to very high works of art and literature. And I think it's similar in life with chess. You know, how long does it take to play chess? Well, if you mean play chess like the rules, an hour. If you mean play chess like being good at chess, all your life, and you never finish learning. You can ask a grandmaster and they'll say, you know, anybody who says they've learned how to play chess is a fool. They are definitely not a chess player. You could do it with golf too. So I think there's a way to interpret the levels of consciousness as, I would say, in the words of a teacher, a pre-enlightenment activity, which is you grow in levels of consciousness to reach the truth. And then someday, if you do enough work, you're going to get it. There's another that says, you're not going to get anything. I mean, there is nothing to get. You are that which you're looking for, and there's nothing. That's so. It's almost funny. It's like the character in a dream saying, "I'm going to wake up." The character of the dream cannot wake up. The dreamer may wake up, or the dreamer may become lucid in the dream, but the character doesn't wake up. So there's not, you can't do, there are no levels, like how awake is the character in a dream? Nothing. I mean, it's either conscious or unconscious. And if the character in the dream is conscious, it will realize that it doesn't exist except as an activity of the mind of the dreamer, which becomes lucid as that character or as that point of view in the dream. There is no level. The moment that happens, it's done. Now you can forget about it. The character can go back to an unconscious being lost in the dream, but it's not another level. It's on or off. If the character dissolves its apparent separation and realizes the truth, that's it. I mean, there's nothing more. Now, that's not the end of the road. In the traditions, that's called enlightenment, or the moment of Satori, which is, I say Satori is cheap. It's relatively inexpensive. There are many ways to get it. It's like, you know, you can get hit by a Zen master with a bamboo stick, or you can take ayahuasca, or you can have a meditative experience, or you can have like the ultimate orgasm. And then suddenly you realize that things are not the way they look, and you are not what you appear to be. That's it. It's on or off. And now you got it. Now it's almost impossible to live with that awareness. So I say enlightenment is cheap, because then the expensive part is self-realization. It's actualization. It's not getting the vision. It's what do you do with that? There's this great story about a monk that wanted to achieve enlightenment, and he's told that there's a hermit that is so wise that he can really teach anybody, he can help anybody achieve the self-realization. So, well, he goes to this mountain where the hermit is supposed to live, and he's looking. This old man with a bunch of wood comes through. It's like carrying the wood for fire. It's actually pretty heavy. And the monk says, hey, do you know where the hermit lives? I'm trying to find this hermit. No, I'm not sure. I mean, it's very hard to find this guy. Of course, this was the guy. But he says, no, I don't know. But why are you looking for him? He says, oh, because I've been told that he can help anybody achieve enlightenment. Enlightenment. That's obvious. So how do I get enlightenment? And the hermit, which was this old man, just drops the wood, just like, and that's the moment of Satori. Like, wow, I mean, like in every Zen story. Oh, I got it. This is amazing. Yeah. Oh, gee, let go. Stop efforting. Blah. So it's like a waterfall of insight, and the monk is now suddenly enlightened. He takes this breath, and then he looks, and now what? The old man just picks up the wood, puts it back, and continues to walk. And Jack Cornfield, the great teacher, has this book, After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. I love that title. I love that title. And I think that a lot of people say, okay, you know, I'm going to do a lot of merit. And it's called a progressive path. And it's reasonable. If I meditate enough, I chant enough, I burn enough incense, I do enough yoga, I help other people, I eat vegetarian, I save the world, I do all these good deeds, then I'm going to be enlightened. It's the ultimate ego trip, because nobody gets enlightened. I mean, enlightenment is not something that happens to the person.
It's not something that you have. It's something that you are. But we really live in this paradigm where people are on a self-optimization trip, and they make everything a means to an end. Like spirituality becomes a mean to an end, and the end is to be better than others, or more enlightened, or more spiritual. So we call it the creation of the spiritual ego, which is really, as you say, the exact opposite of the realization that nothing exists independently, that there is no separate self. I mean, this is the basic teaching of Zen and Buddhism, and I think Advaita, many...
everybody, yeah, exactly.
Everything.
All the wisdom traditions will say that.
I mean, and a lot of people, as you said, say, ultimately we are like characters in a dream, like interacting with itself, but there's only one host, one shared consciousness. It's like the host for all of us. So there are like so many analogies. Realization, to say, is really ultimately unglamorous. There is no glamour to this realization. And as you say, it's really hard to get there. And once you have realized this, and it's a huge difference between understanding it intellectually and experiencing, making a full experience, immersing with being in connection and seeing that everything is related. Nothing exists independently. And it's the death of the ego. And this is somehow counterintuitive for leaders, because they are cultivated and maybe successful because of ego, not because of the state of enlightenment, realizing that they don't exist independently. And ultimately, we could say this is the precondition for being a great leader, but it's hard to get there. So for me, my question would be, how do you do that? How do you help your clients to realize what they really are? Because this is a deeply spiritual practice and experience related to that.
Well, I don't do that explicitly. I don't have these kind of conversations regularly with them. So, yeah, I was saying before, there's pre-enlightenment sadhana, which would be a spiritual practice to clean up and prepare yourself to be able to discover what is true without completely freaking out or losing your mind. And there's post-enlightenment sadhana, where you let your insight, the moment of truth that you experience, really colonize all your life and all your experience as an apparent separate entity. Because there is something like I don't think your thoughts. I don't feel your feelings. So you are different than me. At least it looks like that. And that we can't discard that. We can't say, oh, we're all related. I mean, in a trivial way, yes. But I believe the truth is we're not related. We're literally the same. So it's like the waves of the ocean are not related. So the whole language changes. And I use the analogy of the ocean. A wave in the ocean is not a noun. You can see there's a wave and it started and it moves and then it crashes against the shore. But the truth is there is no wave. There's only an ocean waving. The wave, it's the noun term we use for a verb because it's only the ocean that is there. The only essence is the water. Now the water manifests in appearances of waves. But we can track the waves and we can say, here's one wave, there's another wave, there's another wave. Just like you live in the mountains and you can say, I live in this mountain, not that mountain. But the mountains are waves in the earth. You could see there is no mountain. Mountain is a way in which the earth has shaped, but there's no mountain except in the distinction of language of a particular observer. So you can say this mountain is related to that other mountain and there's a road that goes from here to there. Yes, but once you start talking about the earth is not related to anything. Like the earth is, and the mountains are movements or very slow geological movements of this earth, just like the water moves in a much faster pace, and that's what we can see it. So I do believe that there are opportunities to refine the wave experience without necessarily going all the way to the ocean of consciousness that manifests in this manifest or this apparent reality. That's very that's like heavy duty, and most brains will explode with that. It's not something I would say it's like the strongest drug that I've ever tried, and I've tried almost any shamanic drug you can imagine, and they're profound, but they're all the same. At the end, all the shamanic experiences, fasting, I mean, whatever, not just chemicals, but every experience ultimately is pursuing this realization, which is not swallowable, like it's not digestible for most apparent entities. Now, once you got it, it doesn't mean it's the end of the road. Now you have to live with it and see, okay, how do you integrate into your life? But I have to say, I don't work with anybody who's there. The people who are there, I consider my teachers. And I go like the post-enlightenment sadhana, the spiritual practice after enlightenment. So I'd say I can barely survive the sight of the light. And well, thanks to whatever entity, God, the ocean of consciousness, I haven't dissolved into an entropic soup, as a philosopher says. Like I'm still coherent for a while, for a limited time only. But during the limited time in which I can stay coherent, I, as this apparent character in the dream, then I'm still engaged in the spiritual practice, very much the same. But now it's to manifest and explore what are the implications of that awareness in the way I interact with people. And I feel very humble, but it's almost superhuman. I mean, I still yell at my dogs when they don't respond to, it's like, no, don't do that. And it's like, okay, yes, they are the same consciousness. There are waves in the ocean of consciousness, but they just chewed my sock. And, the hell with this. I'm going to shake them. Don't do that. I'm still afraid when my horse gets a little anxious, and yeah, we're the same, but it can kill me with a kick. So it's a,
Yeah.
that's it. But with the people I work
Journey.
with, just to go
Yeah.
back to your question,
Yeah.
I feel my contract with them is not to bring that to the center, but it is to like to alleviate the suffering that is calling them to realize the truth, but alleviate the suffering and help them achieve the maximum level of peace and happiness that is compatible with the level of self-realization that they are able to integrate in their lives. And that is where I would agree with you that there are levels of consciousness. So there are levels of ability to integrate these truths. And I'm not saying I even know the highest level, like I know what I know and I can't see what I can't see. But I can see that many of the people in business are pursuing ultimately self-defeating purposes, because you're not going to be peaceful and you're not going to be happy when you get that promotion. I know, I've seen too many people. And after you get your first billion, you want two. And after you get two, you want to be in the Forbes list. And after you're in the Forbes list, you want to be on top. And after you're on top, you want to stay on top. And then you want other kind of power. It's never enough. Nothing is ever enough for the dissolution of the sense of lack. That lack always comes back. So it's possible to trust the process and help people pursue what I believe is a self-defeating goal, but in a way that will prepare them to then aspire to something that is less self-defeating. So it's a gradual approach, and in this, as they grow in that search for peace and happiness, they realize that peace and happiness are simply other ways to speak about love. There's no peace and no happiness without love. There's no peace and happiness without justice. There's no peace and happiness without truth. So now love, truth, peace, happiness, justice, freedom. Now they are like different facets of the same diamond. And the power over others is not there. The power over others is like the shadow, is the other side. Or the ability to destroy is the other side, is the fear, the separation, the sense of alienation. So it's possible to help people pursue their deepest goals without helping them necessarily accomplish their more shallower or manifest desires. That's what I do.
I think that's beautiful also, to say you don't help people reach their desires and goals that come from a place of fear, separation, scarcity, but help them to move to a place of trust, maybe, and abundance, and what you say, love, ultimately. And I really truly believe that when people act and come from that place, if they somehow are able to cultivate these qualities and recognize them, and recognize them as these qualities, that they most probably will also practice business and leadership that adds to the prosperity, and that's
Absolutely.
maybe less destructive. So as you say, I think there's really no difference between doing something that destroys ourselves and is also destructive for what we do. So who we are when we're doing what we're doing makes the difference on the impact we create. So
Exactly.
I fully believe we cannot create, like, the means condition the end, is what they say in Buddhism. So if the means are coming from stress and from anxiety and from as you say, greed, so this is exactly what you will produce, and that's exactly the impact. This is what will grow more and more and bigger and bigger. So really, where you go is to the source, where people come from and who they are when they, and as you say, they express themselves through business and through leadership. So this is basically a life practice. It's not a job. It's a practice. It's a way how you express who you are. And you go, what I understand, to the place, who are they really? And what qualities can they cultivate? And what I find so interesting is Thich Nhat Hanh once said that leaves are made of non-leaf ingredients. So leaves are made of the sun and the water and the air and the universe. Everything's, there is no leaf. It's made of non-leaf ingredients. And I believe it's the same for business. Business is basically made of non-business ingredients. Yes, there are some like things that you learn in business school, but ultimately we talk about human desire. We talk about love. We talk about maybe greed. We talk about competition. We talk about trust or non-trust. All of these things, these deeply human experiences, is the material that business is made of. And so when I now would like to shift the conversation to the role of consultants who have realized that and who believe that their job is to help others express these qualities through leadership and through business. And this is what I call maybe conscious consulting, or you can name it however you want to. And I would like to explore for you what is, and if we maybe can also add, for me, what I create with my clients and the impact I create has a lot to do with who I am, not how smart I am and what I have learned at school and all the practices and all the techniques that I've learned as a consultant, but who am I? What place am I coming from when I meet them? And my experience is that this ultimately really makes a difference. I can apply the same people, different people can apply the same practices, but the impact will be totally different depending on who you are when you are meeting them. So what have you cultivated within yourself? And I think, and I believe that maybe this is a possibility for consulting also to evolve, to not try to change something out there, but to create the conditions, our inner conditions, to be helpful, to create a positive impact for others. What's your take on that? Who are you when you meet your clients? How important is that?
Well, I agree 100% with you, Julia. But I have a tactic which is a little different than yours. I don't speak about this at all. My strategy is very, you can say, devious, but it's a deviousness in service of the other. So it's a little bit of a trick. So my approach is to present to the others, to the people that study, tools that are intellectually unassailable. And nothing is mine. I've learned everything. So I just put a toolkit together with an integration. I call it conscious business. You can call it anything, conscious consulting, doesn't matter. But I put together a set of tools that are quite normal, I mean, almost obvious, that are underwhelming because people say, well, anybody can do that. I mean, just to, no, I don't want to be mysterious, but to say when something happens in the world, instead of thinking that it happened to you, to conceive that what happened, it didn't happen to you. So it's not, the drought is not something that God did to you. It's just dry. Or if it rains, it didn't rain on your birthday, it just rained. It just happened to be your birthday, but it didn't happen to you. And you're not guilty for it either. But what you are is able to respond. Just like Stephen Covey said, you're response able in the face of things, not for things. So, of course, neither you nor I have anything to do with the pandemic. That's a disaster, a plague that came upon the world for whatever reasons, but I can guarantee it wasn't me and it wasn't you. And then the normal attitude is, well, it has nothing to do with me. It's just a curse. And, I'm a poor victim of something that came about via natural or unnatural causes, doesn't matter. But whatever causes it was, they were outside of my control. Or you can feel guilty, like we misbehaved and I misbehaved, so this is a punishment and I did something and blah, 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 blame on me. Oh my God, no, mea culpa. Which is like blaming yourself or victimizing yourself. And the alternative, more in line with like Viktor Frankl's perspective, existentialist perspective, is I am able to respond to it. I have the chance to choose what to do about it, not for it to be there or not to be there. That's outside of my control. But what am I going to do now? What are you going to do now? So you're able to respond to anything. You're not able to respond for anything because it wasn't your fault. It's not you for you to blame. Now, if you think about it, it's absolutely obvious. There's nothing special about this, a sense of unconditional responsibility in the face of any event that happens in your life or that affects you. And I can talk about it. There's a lot of philosophy, psychology. It's unassailable. And people will say, yeah, this is great. Let's be responsible. Let's be leaders, not victims. We're going to respond to things. And then something bad happens, and they feel like a victim, and they say, yeah, sorry, my other meeting went over, and that's why I arrived late. So I had another, or I had this problem, and they still speak in third person. They blame other circumstances and so on. Or if someone disagrees with you, before you start opposing them and fighting with them, make sure you understand what they say, whether to change your mind because they may be right and you may discover your argument has a problem, or to find out where you disagree with them and where would be the best way to point out the divergence between your way of thinking and their way of thinking. So it's clearly a superior strategy to understand what the other person is telling you. And yet almost no one can do it. You start arguing, you raise your voice, you want to convince the other person by shouting or by speaking slower and louder and becoming menacing. And that's the worst thing you could ever do. The other person shuts down, they start speaking louder and pushing back on you, and then it's a mess. I don't know a single person that in a quiet state of mind wouldn't agree with me 150%. Everybody agrees with this. But yes, and this is the trick. They can't do it. And it drives people mad because when they read the material and when they see it, it's obvious that this is the superior way to operate. But when they try to do it, they can't. And it's like a curse because now you know that there's a better way. And you can't listen to other people when they disagree with you. You just get furious. It's like you see red and you lose everything. Or you say, if you make a commitment and you're not going to be able to fulfill it, you call the person in advance, you let them know, you negotiate to minimize the consequences. You honor your word. I mean, this is not like spiritual enlightenment. I'm not teaching Advaita or some Sanskrit old text. I'm saying, look, if you made a promise and something goes wrong and you're not going to make it, call the person. I mean, for Christ's sake, just call them and say, look, I need to apologize. This happened. Explain to them what happened and ask them what are the consequences so you can minimize them. And take responsibility because you are breaking your word. So at least honor it because you can't deliver. 100%. I mean, literally, nobody can say no. And if someone says, well, that's not a good way to proceed, it's like, okay, would you like me to do this to you? So when I make a promise to you, would you like me to break it? And so, I mean, I know all the ways to argue for these things. And this is so Western, so normal. I never talk about what I'm telling you now. I don't talk about that. It's not necessary. Why? Because once they agree with all these obviously reasonable practices, and the person tries to do them, they can't. And then they'll come and say, no, this doesn't work. I said, this works. You don't work. The problem is not the tool. The problem is the tool user. And that's where I join exactly with what you said before. But I don't tell that to people. I don't start by telling you, oh, it's your level of consciousness, your emotional balance, your inner health. I mean, people who want that, they go to see a guru. They go to see other people. Hire me as a business advisor. They don't hire me as a guru or a spiritual teacher or a meditation teacher or a consciousness teacher. Conscious business for them is like, oh, okay, this guy found a brand. It's a nice word. Everybody talks about consciousness. I want to be conscious. Great. And I like, yeah, I play the part of this like little joker or on the court jester, as I tell people. I make people laugh. I share stories and all that, and say, yeah, I learned a lot. It's like, okay, now put it in practice. They fail miserably, and when they fail miserably, the real learning starts. But without that failure, people still have. It's like somebody saying, I'll be happy when I have $1 million. If I win the lottery and I have $1 million, that would be the end of all my trouble. And there are two options. One is to say, that's not true. Let's talk about it because it's not going to happen, blah, blah. And we can argue until you're blue in the face. Or another is, hey, look, here's $1 million. Go be happy. Come back in a week and tell me how happy you are. And the person will come like, oh, great, I have $1 million. And then it'll come in a week and say, I'm miserable. Okay, so it wasn't $1 million.
I mean, Fred, what you're talking about, I don't use spiritual language with clients. I don't talk about consciousness and enlightenment. I don't think that's the right context for that. I think that's important for us. And the question is the translation. And I remember talking about tools, the tool that you teach us was how to lead difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. And I find that is really, really helpful because this helps you to stay clear and present and conscious in the face of conflict, where emotions can come up and you lose your conscious and you just lose it and then you just make it worse. So what you're saying is you teach people, and I think that's a deeply spiritual practice. This is what meditation basically is about, is to notice, to learn to notice something about their own behavior, to notice that being late and lying about it is a lack of integrity, is not honoring their own word. I think we can even talk about personal mastery, is to own your own decisions, to own your life, to own your choices. And to fully own them is to be with them and not try to lie to yourself or others or find excuses. And these are, like, as you say, basic small things, but actually they're huge. They make a huge difference in people's lives once they realize that they lead when they are not their word in small things. Nobody will follow them in the big things. And this is a deep realization. People are not aware of that leadership doesn't mean to make the big decisions, but it's about that everyday small behavior that people are observing, and where they see, is this guy taking himself seriously? Is he committed to his own word? Is he his word or her word? So this is what leadership is. And I once said what really great leadership for me personally, and I think I'm always, and I'm sure you do the same, I always include myself in everything that I teach others or consult others. I'm always including myself because I'm also always practicing. I'm not perfect in any way. You're not perfect. We're all not. But to integrate integrity and presence and kindness already would make a difference. I think these are three aspects for me that are really a hard practice: to be kind, to be present. I mean, just to be here and notice, not regret the past or thinking about the future, but just being fully here already makes a huge difference and makes you really impactful as a leader, and helps you to realize what is going on around me, what is going in within me, And it could make a difference in what kind of decisions, what insights, what realizations you have in this very moment. So without one time talking about enlightenment, consciousness, whatever, this already, I believe, would make the world a little bit better without having to trying to change the world out there. That's a very powerless world. We don't really have a lot of impact, as you say, on the world and what other people are doing. The only impact we have or power we have is on ourselves, and most people really don't have power on them, on their own choices. So when we go back to Viktor Frankl, and I think it's funny that you use a lot of like Austrians, like Hayek. Viktor Frankl is an Austrian, so I'm Austrian. Hello.
Lucy von Mises is my mentor in economics.
It's incredible.
Austria,
it's a small country, but there are some people there. And yeah, like being able to choose is first of all being able to notice, to distinct between a situation and your reaction to it, but then also make a wise choice on how to respond. And this is also not so easy. This also needs a lot of practice, and we learned a lot from Taoism how to respond in a resonant way, how to be with what's going on. Also endless possibilities and how to respond to something. Now, being aware that there's a distinction between a situation and my response already is a big thing. Not losing it in the face of emotion, and then making a wise decision as a third step also is not so easy. I mean, as you say, it seems like simple things and people are not able to do it. I'm not able to do it most of the times. It's getting a little bit better, but this is what we call practice. And life is a practice, basically. Life maybe is a practice. Maybe that's what life is ultimately. What is life?
Life is an opportunity, I think. Life is an opportunity for awareness to become self-aware and recognize itself across boundary, artificial as it may be, to create the meta consciousness. So I don't think humans have any particular advantage over any other living entity, because life is consciousness. The consciousness is everywhere. There is a unique feature of the human life, as far as I know. Could be there's another animal that, or another life form, could be, you know, aliens. But as far as I know, I understand, and we know in general, the only life form that has self-awareness is the human life. So if there is this ocean of consciousness that has the will to know itself and to love itself and to recognize itself, it has to divide itself into an experiencer and an experience. And then not only to experience, which is what every animal does, because my dog is as conscious as I am. My dog sees a bone and it knows where it is, or it sees a tree and it will go towards it, or will whatever. You know, the dogs have everything. They're as conscious as they can be. They see even better than I do and hear better than I do. What the dog doesn't have is the question, what is life? Who am I? What am I doing here? Dogs never ask themselves, what am I going to do when I grow up? You know, I'm going to be a big dog, or I'm going to go to school. Dogs don't have a future. Dogs don't have a past. So they are in the present moment, but they are, let's say, meta unconsciously or unmeta consciously in the present moment. Because they're in the present moment, but they don't know they're in the present moment because they are not aware of past and future. As humans, we can be deluded by flying into fancy about the future, or by flying into regret or some worry about the past. So when we are in the present moment, we're not just in the present moment, we also are aware that we're in the present moment. So right now, you're not just aware of me. You and I are having a conversation. If I ask you, are you aware? You would go into, yeah, of course I'm aware. I experience you. But there's a difference between experiencing me and experiencing your own awareness, because the latter is an experience that has no object. How do you know that you're aware? Where do you, so if I say, do you see me? You look at the screen and say, yeah, I see you. Yeah, it's a good connection. If I say, do you hear me? You say, yeah, I hear you, in my ears, or I have my headphones, and so it's okay. So you go to your sense of sound and you say, I'm conscious of your words. I say, are you conscious that you're conscious? That's right. Are you aware that you're aware? Are you aware now, right now? Yes. Okay. But where do you go? Because there's no place where it's like self-awareness. Awareness is aware of itself in the human form. So it's not consciousness, but it's meta-consciousness. It's the consciousness of being conscious that is unique to this human life. And going back to this principle that there's only waves in the ocean of infinite consciousness. You can imagine a wave when it breaks, it goes like this. There's this moment in which the wave is tunneling, and then it can look down, like imagine the head of the whale, the foam at the top of the wave when it's about to crash, when it makes this tunnel or semicircular motion forward to fall. There's this moment when the wave looks at the ocean. It looks down and says, "Oh, like who am I? I'm me, but this is like looking at my own feet, but my own feet are universal, they're infinite. It's the whole ocean under me. Like, where do I start? Where do I end? I'm made of the same water that the whole ocean is made." That moment, like for me, a human life is just that moment, that infinitesimal moment in which the ocean of consciousness has an opportunity to develop or grow into self-awareness and meta-consciousness. So I think that's ultimately what life is. The human life is it's an opportunity for the dreamer to become lucid as a particular character and recognize itself as the divine that it is, but not because it never was or because it's getting anything new. In fact, there's less. It's just the lucidity and the love that comes and the beauty that comes and the peace that comes and the truth that is inherent in that moment, because that is what the ocean of consciousness is essentially, regardless of how it manifests. That's how I conceive, at least as this semi-lucid character, what I conceive. This is an opportunity, and there's nothing more beautiful to do than just to enjoy that and to invite other people to celebrate it. There's nothing to do or get. This is not an achievement. It's more like, wow, it's like seeing a sunset. There's nothing to get. You just see, and you're overwhelmed by the beauty. And imagine if you saw a sunset, and in addition to the beauty that is obvious in the sunset, you had this experience. That's me. Like, oh my God, oh me, I am that, and that is me. So the famous word, the famous phrase is that Vamasi is translated as I am that. I find that a little misleading, because it's like the wave saying I am the ocean. But the true translation is that is I. It's not I am that. I am that is a little egoic, because there is no I. It's that is I. It's like the wave saying the ocean is I. I am nothing. I'm a movement of the ocean. So it's not I am that, but that is I. And imagine if you saw the sunset and you had the experience of beauty and simultaneously saying, that is I. That I am a perspective of that, recognize it itself as that. And that's all there is.
I mean, it sometimes feel like there's also like life moving through us, like a wave is ultimately a vibration moving through water. and to feel and to sense the experience of life moving through us, and is really amazing. And I can remember there was a teaching by Eckhart Tolle where he once said, people said, you know what I'm going to do with my life, and my life this, my life that. And he said, there's no your life. There's just life. You are life, but it's not your life. It's just, you are just life. It's not your
I'm
life.
saying,
And
exactly. I'm saying
it's not
something
your
even
life.
more radical. I mean, I think Eckhart Tolle would agree with something more radical. There is no you. It's not your life because there's no you that can have a life. There's only life. So you are a way in which life moves. But there's no two things. This is the notion of Advaita. There's no two. It's not like you have a life or you don't have a life. Because whatever you say is wrong because there's no you. It's like, does the wave have water? Not really, because there's only water moving. There is no wave. There's a famous Zen koan about the student asking the teacher, does a dog have Buddha nature? And the teacher says, mu. Mu means I unask your question. Because your question is based on a premise that makes it impossible to answer it. It's like, do you have a soul? Mu. Do you have a spirit? Mu. Because there's no you. There's no dog. There's only, as Teilhard then said, I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. There's only a spiritual being having a human experience. This thing I call the human is not a thing. It's an experience of whatever thing there is out there that we call that. You can call it God, you can call it the divine, the beloved, you can call anything, consciousness, truth, Satchitananda. You call it with any name, and every name is right and every name is wrong, because it's not even one thing. That's why the Advaita says no two, because even saying one is wrong, because one only makes sense with respect to two. It's like 1, 2. You need a dichotomy. So the best thing they could say, very humbly, is, I can tell you there is no two. So it's one. Not quite, because one is already counting. So this is just not two. There is no, you don't have a life because there is no you that can have a life. There's only life that moves and makes it look like there's a you.
You mentioned I would say even the problem of language before, because language creates an illusion that they are separate things, like a fist, which is in some languages, they don't use fist, they just use the word fisting, or they don't use tree, they just say treeing. And Shantena always quotes Lao Tzu, who said the Tao that can be talked about is not the true Tao. So our language already is a little bit problematic because it creates an illusion of entities or separate things. And maybe just coming back to a core topic, I think that's also your topic is when we talk about communication or culture or corporate culture. I think one way is to apply this insight, that a realization that we have with our clients without having to go to the Nishakarata, Advaita and so on, because we don't have that context or oftentimes,
yes,
is to maybe help them understand that culture is an activity. It's culture rising. It's an activity that just seems like it's a solid thing because we do it so many times until it appears as if it was a stable thing that needs a lot of change and effort. And I tell them it takes a lot of effort to reenact it every day and to make it look stable. So it's not a problem really to change it. The problem is to make it stable as it is, because you can really choose it differently in every single moment, because it is not a thing that has to be moved from A to B, but it is an activity. For me, this is one of the practical applications of, I would say, spiritual insight for myself, to translate it for clients and make it more practical. And it's maybe a more empowering idea that things are actually not objects, even though they're told, but activities performed so many times so that they seem like they're an object and they appear as objects. And our language then wraps it into the illusion of an object too, and to just change a little bit the language from also, there's no communication, there's just communicating. There's just the experience of communicating, of talking to each other. So we are, some people could say what they're doing is communication, but actually we are in the process together, and there is that no beach without land and wave coming. So it's just co-emerging, and this is something that I can in my work, for example, bring to the awareness of leaders. What is really what's going on? A stream of activities. There's not even a structure in organization. I mean, where's the structure? Where's the organization structure? It's also just an abstraction of interaction that's happening all the time on a lot of levels, and most are not rational. So this is for me one of the services we can bring to them, and also to see it as a precious opportunity to have a specific role that has more responsibility than other people, which is, as you many times say, the role of leaders is create a context, create a culture, create an atmosphere. You can call it many things, where people can thrive and show up and manifest and self-actualize. That's a very noble, I would say, purpose, a very noble thing to do. But that needs this kind of awareness how life actually works. Most leaders and also consultants, I think, are not aware what's actually going on behind the words that they're using and behind this abstraction and apparent separate objects. And this is maybe a contribution we could bring to this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you were speaking, Julia, I remembered a way people described Steve Jobs. They said Steve Jobs could create a reality distortion field around him, and that people were entranced by this. Like, you would think you can do anything. And I like the term. It's very like good marketing, and it has a very nice ring. But I think that what conscious leader creates, it's a reality clarifying field. It feels distorted to the people that live in the world of objects that are already given, that are unchangeable. So I don't think Steve Jobs distorted reality. He clarified what is true in reality, which is the beauty, the elegance, the grace of the designs, the commitment to make it something that would change people's lives in a magnificent way. Regardless of his own personal quirks, it's just a human, but this is not a reality distortion field. People call it distortion because they live in that distorted reality. A true leader, the conscious leader, creates a reality enabling field, a field in which people can connect to the truth, to the accuracy, to the beauty, the power, the sweetness of connection that underlies everything that manifests as separate. That is not distortion. That will only be called distortion by the people who are entranced by the mirage. So they think we live in a world that doesn't exist, and the leader says, no, it's possible. It's possible. I see it. That's the visionary. I see it. It's there. So, where do you see it? It's not there. It's like, well, yes, it's there. You can see it, but I see it. And it's a distortion of your reality because you're stuck in it. So the inspiration that a true leader can bring is to open up a deeper level of truth that is able to manifest in the people that are being led now.
That's very beautiful. And yeah, I think also very inspiring definition of leadership. And as you were talking, it's clarifying, it's maybe also an act of creation, which is also a human ability to create something out of nothing. Somebody said this is what artists do. They create something out of nothing. But sometimes it's also entrepreneurs they create something out of nothing. They invent something, and the invention doesn't start with a tangible product, but it starts with an idea, with a vision that you can see. Like you said, people could, like big artists, they could see the Pietà in a block. They didn't see a block of marble. They could see the Pietà, and what they did is just put away what's too much there. So this is what we can do, what we call the act of shaping and creating. And as you say, like creating a field, an enabling field. This is really, I think now we are at the core, what it really means to be true leadership, to create something, a field that aligns people without having to tell everybody what to do. It's this alignment, is the field is aligning the people, and the field is filled with an information. The information is fueled by the vision that we are able to create as humans. And this is what I would say is a precious opportunity that we have as humans, and that we could honor if we could even imagine and make it possible for ourselves. A lot of leaders don't even see the possibilities for themselves to be someone like that. But you don't even have to be Steve Jobs. You can do it in a very small, everyday situation. Even if you are in a little shop, you can create an energy field that is inspiring for people, and people do it all the time. What is what is needed for people? Why are some people able to do that and others not? And what can we consultants add to that? What is our part in bringing this possibility into life, into realization, into manifestation?
I go back to what I said before when you asked me what's my job is. I think what we can do is help people recognize that potential in themselves in the right way that fits their life conditions. Not everybody can be Steve Jobs, but everybody can create a field of beauty. Everybody can create a field of truth. You can be a waiter in a restaurant. And I've had my day changed by the experience of being served with kindness or being served with unkindness. So something as simple as a cheerful waiter that is really trying to make your eating experience something more than just food that fuels your biology. You can be a plumber. I mean, God knows when you need a plumber, what a blessing it is to have a plumber that comes and does the job and finishes properly and charges you the right thing, and it's reliable and it fulfills his or her commitments. And without that, you'll be in trouble. You can be a dentist, you can be a hygienist, you can be it doesn't matter what you are. You can be a truck driver, it doesn't matter. So recognizing that I would say the field activity, your ability to create a field around you is completely independent of your occupation, completely independent. You can be a mother, you can be a stay-at-home father, you can be anything. And then still create a field of love and beauty and truth and freedom and justice around you and with the people that you join in community. That's true leadership. And just like a magnetic field aligns the iron shavings, that field will align the people that respond to it. I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that don't respond to it now because they've forgotten who they are. So now it's hard, and it's not very appealing to do that because not too many people will be aligned by this kind of magnetic force, because we are, I would say, as dark at times as there's always been. People are magnetized more by power, by fame, by wealth, by sexiness, which are evolutionary forces that the genes have imposed upon us. So it's like the matrix. We're designed to be hacked. Our Our bodies are conveyor belts for genes to go from one generation to the other. And just if you look at natural evolution, we are genetically engineered to survive until puberty, procreate, and die. That's the mechanism of genetic evolution. So we're not designed to be happy. We're not designed to be self-aware. We're not, I mean designed like shaped by evolutionary forces, survival, procreation. I'm talking pure Darwinism here. I'm being hardcore evolutionary theory. It's, genes in the genetic pool will survive when the organisms that they give shape to have an evolutionary advantage to survive and procreate. And that's what's going to spread. And those who don't will disappear from the genetic pool. So we have evolved over millions of years, because it's not just humans. Before humans existed, the very animals that survive are the ones that, wanted more food and wanted more sex and were able to kill their opponents before they killed them, or at least procreate before they got killed, and so on. And it's still, you look at the natural world, it's anything but conscious. I mean, this is or meta-conscious. Then there's no kindness. There's nothing. It's just survival. It's what Schopenhauer saw. It was like, oh my God, are you talking about a kind God? I mean, there's only the will, and the will is to survive. And then Nietzsche said the will is to overpower everything else. When you look at the needs of the apparatus to achieve this outside perspective over who I am, well, survival is necessary. It's not a sufficient condition for meta-consciousness, but certainly necessary, because if genetic evolution would have stopped at the level of unicellular organisms or at the level of, the early weeds, there is no human. But it took millions of years to produce this apparatus, which is a blessing because we're meta-conscious, but it's also a curse because we have millions of years of karma or inertia about being unconscious and being magnetized by food, by sex, by power, by wealth, by our ability to destroy other people. And that is positive for evolution. It's terrible for happiness and for love and for truth, but we're not designed to be truthful. We're designed to survive, procreate, and die. That's it. As Hobbes said, our natural life is nasty, brutish, and short. That's what we're designed to have, because we are not it. Our genes are using us to live infinitely. Again, you can read the selfish gene. There are lots. I know it sounds a little crazy what I'm saying, but it is what it is. It's like this. Science would agree 100%. And since you said, are things changing? Well, the Stoic philosophers knew this over 2,000 years ago. And much of what I teach, I'm embarrassed to say, after I wrote my book and I started studying Stoic philosophy, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I copied everything and I didn't credit them. I promise I didn't do that. I mean, I'd rather claim ignorance than being a fraud. I was just ignorant. Now I've written about it and I've acknowledged my debt, through other people, but I hadn't read the Stoics. When I read the Stoics, it's like, oh my God, they knew. They were saying exactly the same things. Like, if you just let yourself go, you're going to live a miserable life, because what tastes good is not healthy. It's not good for you. And what is good doesn't always taste good. So you have to choose. Are you going to eat with your palate, or are you going to eat with your mind? Because if you eat with your mind to be healthy, you're not going to eat the things that suit your palate, and vice versa. Like if I could, I would eat French fries, chocolate milkshakes, and very greasy hamburgers all the time. It's like my favorite. And then I would eat fried donuts with dulce de leche, churros con dulce de leche, like you have there in Spain.
Do you eat churros? Do you like
churros?
churros?
The churros. My mouth
chocolate.
waters. My mouth waters just saying it. I haven't eaten them in 30 years, and my mouth waters. I just need to think. But so why not? Because that's what your organism is asking you to do. Now, if you eat a churro once in your life because it was like a unique thing, but that's junk food. Why is it so addictive? Because we're hackable. We are hackable by these memes that will take advantage of our evolutionary conditioning to look for dense caloric foods, sugar and fat. And if we are at the risk of starving, that's a good strategy, but our genes didn't get the message. I mean, our bodies still think that we're at the risk of starving. That's why we like churros. We have millions of years of evolution saying, go eat that donut. And what is it going to take for you to say no? Why not? Look, it's going to taste delicious. Yes, but I'm not going to do it because I've discovered that how I feel the morning after has a lot to do with what I did the night before. That's the biggest discovery in life. It's like, oh, you know, the night before is linked to the morning after. If I don't like how I feel the morning after, maybe there's not much I can do the morning after. I have to go back and say, what did I do the night before? And I need to change my ways because I am not happy. So suffering, as the Buddha said, is the first noble truth because suffering is what opens the door to learning. When you're suffering, you say something's wrong. Something's wrong. It's just like physical pain and say something's wrong. And then you go into it and you wonder, okay, what's going on? But the pain is a blessed signal that you are behaving in a way that doesn't suit your body. And I think the same is in life. Most people are suffering, but they have no idea why. And they persist because of this inertia in being magnetized by force fields that pander to the lowest instincts: survival, fear, hate, disagreement. And you know, it's like junk food. It tastes good. I mean, you can't. I mean, it is great. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, some people must feel great punishing animals and having the sense of power or killing other human beings. I mean, the kind of atrocities that we've been witness to are unbelievable, and they're happening every day, everywhere. So that's attractive. It's appealing.
But that's still the case when you look at the level of organizations and people, as you say. I think there's a lot of suffering in organizations.
Absolutely.
And exactly what people do in pursuit of power and success is not good for them. I think that you mentioned it also at the beginning. It's like all that stress. It's also a kind of addiction, and you think you want more, and then you suffer more, and then you need a remedy, and then you have all kind of addictions. Also, work and success is an addiction. And I think a lot of consultants are also in this addiction of being successful, having more clients, having more. I mean, I've met a lot. I've been there, I think. And you find out the more you get, the more you suffer. So at a certain point, to understand why that suffering is there and where it comes from. And as you say, I think the first thing is to realize and admit that I'm not happy, that I'm suffering. And I feel that also in organizations and also young leaders, there is somehow a higher awareness of that suffering, and that there is a generation that says, I would like to do it differently. I don't want to go down that rat race. And I think that, as you say, there are not so many people responding. I sense there is some kind of resonance with putting something different out there and say, okay, what if there was a different possibility? What if there was a way of like eating without destroying yourself? What if there was a way of working and even being successful to a certain extent, which also is nice and is joyful and can be really joyful and is great, without being destructive to yourself and others. I feel that there is some sense of questioning up there. And the question is like the opening where, I mean, there's the suffering, and then there is a question, and the question is always the opening where we can come in. If there is no question, there's nowhere to connect. There's nothing really we can do. But I sense that there are some people who are fed up and who just think it has to be that way. But if they would say, what if it could be different? What if it doesn't have to be like this? What if we could resolve it and transform it to a way where it's doing good and doing well, where well-being, I think really in a deeper sense, leads to well-doing as well. I mean, that's what I'm up to, what I think could be a possibility. I think we can go beyond the possibilities of the past. I mean, a little bit. And as you say, all that knowledge is around. I mean, we talk about wisdom traditions here who have been around thousands of years. As you say, there's nothing new about it. Absolutely nothing. But we have forgotten about it, and we don't know how to apply it, and we don't know what it means, what's the meaning of it, and how to practice it. And I think this is something that we can just do ourselves as consultants or as influencers who influence influencers somehow. We have to start with ourselves and practice that and see, is there a possibility? Can we reduce the suffering and increase the joy, love, and everything in ourselves? And it's not about new things. I think this is a pitfall to look for something new. The secret is maybe to apply and see what is there, what has been never not there. That's the hardest thing to see and to honor. That's the best we can hope for, maybe.
Amen to that.
Good. So, Fred, maybe we said we somehow closing the circle. You said you remind people, and there's one question we ask everyone in our podcast at the end of the podcast, which is a very, I would say, blunt question, and you could even say it's very like basic. But the question is, what's the secret to a good life for you?
The secret is that life is good. Any life, even the most apparently horrific life, has a good purpose, which is the self-recognition of what is. At some level, every life is horrible. Every biography ends with death, with old age, disease at best, as the Buddha said. No, best thing that can happen is you get old, you get sick, and you'll die. That's as good as it gets. But worse than that, you can suffer a lot before. So I don't think there is a good life like, hey, this is good. But the truth is every life is good. Every life is meaningful. Not good in the sense of pleasure or even the permanent sense of what we call joy or happiness, but even the pain, even the suffering, even the horror of witnessing what we're doing to each other, it is bearing witness to what is. And that witnessing is good. That's goodness itself. So I think that's the secret, not that there's a technique to get there, but the secret is that that is what is always underneath everything. That's my blunt answer to your blunt question. Never thought of that before, but it's a powerful question.
Thank you. And it was a very powerful answer. Yeah. Thank you. So Fred, thank you very much. I think we've gone very far and deep and in all kind of different directions in this conversation.
It's your fault. You created the reality distortion. You're the leader. You created this field. Don't blame me. I'm just a victim. I'm being carried along.
I would say we co-created this whole mess of a conversation or whatever. People, I hope that people would get something out of it. But I think for me, I really enjoyed it, and that's more than enough. That it's really more that one could ask for. So I'd like to thank you to walk with me and to explore together, and to share all different aspects of life. Actually, it was a very philosophical and interesting conversation. But actually, this is the job. Maybe this is maybe our job, to have those conversations and share it, and just not for the purpose or for the idea of people liking it, but inviting it and take it or not to take it. And this is, in this sense, I'd like to say goodbye and thank you to all people who are listening to us, who are looking, and one thing I could say to everybody, just enjoy life, and hope to see you soon. So Fred, I will stop thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will now stop the recording.